My name is Cecilia Van Tonstelar of the Mary Isham Keith chapter, of the National Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution. Today's date is October 21st, 2020. And this interview is being conducted in Columbia Falls, Montana, for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. We are interviewing former Corporal John R. Davies, who served in the Vietnam War. Corporal Davies, will you please tell us more about yourself?
Sure. My name is John Robert Davies. My birth date is 10/24/1944. I was born in Newark, New Jersey. My current wife is Norma S. Davies. I have two children, a Robert A. Davies and a Sherry Davies. My father's name was Robert J. Davies, and he's from Carbondale, Pennsylvania. And my mother's name was Eileen S. Calloway from Newark, New Jersey. I got two brothers, Michael and Timmy Davies, and two sisters, Joanne Horvath and Mary Visco. My father was in the Second World War and had tried to join the Marine Corps, but because of an eye injury when he was a kid, was turned down by the Marine Corps in Pennsylvania and then again in New Jersey. And that's when he met my mother, and they got married, and right after they got married, he got a draft notice, and they took him into the Army. He did his basic training in Fort Dix, New Jersey, and then went out to Arizona, where he had infantry training in the desert, and then they sent him off to the Pacific, to the jungles, and which is pretty par for the military. Because of him, I had always wanted to be a Marine. And I joined up in 1963 while I was still in high school, and was taken in a week following my high school graduation. I was sent to Parris Island, South Carolina, and went through boot camp, and then transferred up to North Carolina and did my infantry training. They sent me to Pensacola, Florida to radio school, which took about 9 months, and after radio school they sent me to Oahu, Hawaii, Kaneohe Bay, where I stayed for the next 14 months or so. Got to spend 3 months down in Australia, teamed up with the Australian Air Force in their radio outfit. Got back to Hawaii and then got sent right over to Vietnam. And I can still remember the night we landed in Da Nang in the pouring rain, dark at night, flares going off all around, and machine gun fire could be heard even before we got off the plane. And that was my introduction to Vietnam, and spent 14 months there in a radio outfit in Da Nang, Chu Lai, Hue, Quang Ngai, and got to see some combat firsthand at all of those places. It felt from my point of view that we were winning the war, but somehow or other, after I left Vietnam, politicians decided they didn't want to win and gave up on it. But it was a real introduction to the world. And I was 18 when I went into the Marine Corps, 19 when I got over to Vietnam, and young and dumb. If I had to do it all over again, I'm not sure I would have made the choices I did. But I made it back, thank God. I'm very thankful for that. Anything else you would like me to get into?
Okay, yes, we want you to cover a lot of things. We want to hear more. So what training did you get right before you came, or right as you?
Well, in North Carolina at Camp Lejeune, I got combat training. And
Can you tell us about it? What it was like?
it was mostly learning how to shoot different types of weapons and how to throw hand grenades and survive them. And it was kind of all forgotten pretty quick when I got sent down to the radio school in Pensacola, Florida. It's a great place to vacation, but I had to learn to type, which was kind of foreign to me. I had always just done hunt and peck on the typewriter for term papers in high school, but had to be able to type 15 words a minute without mistake to get into the radio school. And it was quite interesting. I had to learn to take Morse code on earphones and type down what I heard, whether it be in numbers or letters or a mixture. When I finished the school, I was able to take code at 35 words a minute, which doesn't sound very much for a typist nowadays, but the typewriters we had were the old-fashioned kind without electricity and without the touch keys that would strike a mark with barely a touch. So it was a lot of work to run them old typewriters, and took some time, so it wasn't easy to do 35 words a minute listening to code on the earphones.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened as you were departing for the training camp, and then during your early days, or actually, how that went?
Well, the infantry training I got was only about 4 weeks at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and I'd say most of it was pretty quickly forgotten in radio school, and then to be sent to Hawaii, where it was another great place to vacation, but it was warm and jungle-like, at least in the interior, away from the coast. And it was an interesting place to be, but most of our work there centered around keeping our trucks in ship shape at the motor pool and keeping our radio equipment going strong. And I got temporary duty down in Australia with the Australian Air Force, and they were a great bunch of guys to serve with and be around, and They're pretty good on the radio too, with taking code and listening attentively, and they're a great bunch of guys to be with. And from there I went back to Hawaii, and a week later got shipped off to Vietnam. Had to make a flight over on the C-130. Took 3 days to get there, and we landed in the dark in the middle of a tremendous rainstorm. The amazing thing was that when I woke up in the morning and came out of the tent where they had us sleep, the ground was already dry. There were no puddles. And it kind of goes to show you how warm it got over there in the daytime when it wasn't raining.
What was it like getting used to the physical regimen, the barracks, the food, the social life? What there was of it?
The social life of a Marine basically is the same as most other branches of the service, where peacetime barracks life or stateside life was geared to trying to get you aggravated enough to want to go to war. And they did a good job of that. I was ready, willing, and able when my time came to go to Vietnam. To this day, I don't know if I would do it again. But it was an interesting life.
So tell me, as a radio
Radio operator?
yes, where were you? Were you on the front lines? Were you?
I was usually in the CP area, behind the front lines. Usually protected by the gates. We had set up fences around our headquarters positions. So I wasn't out in the field that much, although I got to do some of that as punishment for trouble I got into from time to time.
So I guess that helped you learn a little bit more about how to follow orders. That's
Yeah,
important.
it certainly did.
So they would ask about your friendships and the camaraderie that you had. Have you kept up with a few of the friends that you made there?
Well, no, I didn't keep up with any of the friends I had in the service while I was in. When I got back from Vietnam, they just sort of wanted to push us out into society without friends, and although I did have a couple of good friends that I stayed in touch with for a while, we all get tied up with things like getting married and having kids and finding a job and trying to pay the rent, and they just kind of all went by the wayside.
When you got back, then how did you go about finding a job? Did you go back for any more schooling or training, or?
Well, first job I got was working for UPS on their truck lines, and I had to give that up because they wanted me to join the union, and it would take over a week's pay to just be able to join the union through them. I went and got a job with the post office instead, and worked for the post office for over a year, picking up mail, delivering mail. And at the time of the Martin Luther King was shot, I was picking up mail in the city of Newark. which had a fairly large black population, and it's kind of scary when somebody would yell out, "There's a white man, let's get him." And I didn't have anything to protect myself but the truck I was driving, and made some tracks out of there quickly. And went from there to a carpenter's helper job, building houses. Did that for over a year and got into a car accident and broke my wrist, so I couldn't swing a hammer anymore. And when the cast finally came off, I was pretty much out of a job, so I heard from one of my sisters that there was job openings at a company she worked for, which I applied to and got the job working in a foundry, which was almost as scary as Vietnam at times, because you always had explosions and everything was big and heavy and dangerous, and you had to watch yourself every minute.
So did you feel prepared as having been in combat for some of those scarier things?
After being in combat in Vietnam, it allowed me to keep my cool when things did go bonkers at the foundry, and I'd be around standing by myself with just one of the melters when we did have some explosions, and it was pretty scary to find out that you're the only one around after there was hundreds of people around when you were doing your work.
So there were a lot of casualties with that job.
There were a number, and I was overcome with toxic fumes once when I was working as a welder for them, and had to go to the hospital where they told me my oxygen level in my blood was only 45% of normal. I wasn't far from not being here anymore, but the hospital took care of me, and after 10 days in an oxygen tent, got to go home and go back to work. I went back to doing what I had been doing before I took the welder's job, which is a ladle operator, and everything was really heavy in the foundry, and big and heavy. We used to pour ingots out of a furnace that were about 1,200 pounds apiece, and 1,200 pounds is a lot of heat when it's just coming out of the furnace into an ingot or a mold, and it's pretty hot. It reminded me of Vietnam and going on R&R for a week. You get frightened to come back after having a breather, and working in the foundry, going on vacation for a week or two, I used to get the same feelings.
Let's go back. So you've been home a while. Where were you when the Vietnam War ended?
I was living in New Jersey. And that was in 1975, I believe. That was about 8 years after I got back from Vietnam. And it was very discouraging to see what happened there. Didn't like it a bit. And after all the people that sacrificed their lives and parts of their bodies over there, and defending our country, and the politicians just gave it up.
Well, so how do you feel that the wartime experiences have affected your life and how?
I don't even know all the ways that it's affected my life. I used to have nightmares on a fairly regular basis for quite a few years after I came back, and it was tough to deal with. You wake up in the middle of the night and you're sweating bullets and thinking there's somebody right around the corner that's going to shoot you. And, it's tough to deal with. And I don't really know how it's affected some of my life. I mean, some of the choices I've made have been good ones, some haven't been so good. And I had trouble staying on the path that I chose to take, and it I don't know where I could have ended up if I hadn't gone through that. I think it's made me a better person, but it's hard to tell.
Does it, you know, when you say a better person, is just with your friends and with your family, or just with your...
Yeah.
So, are there some life lessons that you have earned that you might pass along to?
It's hard to think about past things that may have affected my life and the choices I've made. I think I've made good choices for the most part. And part of me just says that I was lucky. Had an angel watching over me.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to share some of your thoughts for future generations who, you know, who will see this interview?
Well, all I can really say for future generations is war is hell, and you don't want to go there. And somehow finding a way peacefully to solve our problems is what we got to achieve or strive for. And it's a crazy world, and sometimes real hard not to go to war, but we should avoid it at all costs.
Is there anything else that you can share about that we haven't discussed?
Well, I went from our country to quite a bit backward country in Vietnam. I got to meet a lot of good people there, a lot of great people, ones that I was proud to call my friends, and it was hard to see our country give up on them, as well as all the comrades we lost over there. 58,000 people is a lot of a loss. And all for what? They were just trying to do their job and defending our country and doing what they were ordered to do and supposed to do. They're not with us anymore.
Well, I know that you're very active or in several different organizations to do with the military. Can you tell me some of those?
I'm active in the VFW, the DAV, American Legion, and the Vietnam Veterans. And I try to do as much as I can for all of them. And I go to all of the meetings and try to give my input to whatever they need input on. And my wife, bless her heart, makes us these masks,
Yes, those are great.
mainly for the VFW and Vietnam veterans. And I got her some Marine patches to put on along with her Veterans Lives Matter embroidery, and she's pretty hot on that.
That's great. Well, not everyone knows what these various organizations do. Could you take each one and maybe give us a little more detail?
Well, the VFW is, along with the American Legion, is integral in giving support to veterans who were in combat in a wartime situation and came home with problems that may or may not have been visible to most people, both psychologically and physically. There's been an awful lot of veterans that have committed suicide because coming back without the support of the government that sent us over there was kind of difficult for a lot of them to handle, and wound up wondering what their lives were for anyway, and deciding to end it. And the Vietnam Veterans is one of those service organizations that focuses on veteran suicide and how to prevent it. In fact, this teardrop button is supposed to be a reminder for suicide among veterans. So look out for it and find out what the signs are so we can prevent it.
And then you mentioned the DAV.
The DAV is Disabled American Veterans, and they focus mainly on getting people put back together again in a functioning life after they come back. And there've been an awful lot of Americans injured and lost limbs and had tremendous injuries over in Afghanistan and Iraq and Iran and all those Mideastern countries. And the DAV got started back during the First World War and has continued since then in supporting injured veterans, sort of like the Wounded Warrior Project. And the VFW has helped me put claims in to the VA for the PTSD that I've suffered, and helped me through all the paperwork and rigmarole that the VA puts you through. They've helped an awful lot.
What about the American Legion that you're also involved in?
The American Legion is very similar to the VFW, except that the American Legion will take people that are veterans from non-wartime periods and accept them, but they also help out the wounded veterans and all veterans, period. They're not as numerous as the VFW members up where we live in Eureka. But there's still quite a few of them that I know well and like very much and consider as friends.
And how do you feel the community here in this area has treated with veterans?
Well, I moved here from New Jersey 21 years ago, and it wasn't until I got here that someone came and thanked me for my service. And it brought tears to my eyes when it did. Nobody back in New Jersey had ever said that. It's only out here in Montana that people are mindful of it and thankful for it.
Well, Corporal Davies, I want to thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For coming here and allowing us to hear your story. And I personally want to thank you for your service. And there are a lot of people that...
Thank you for thanking.
a lot of people to support you now. And we're grateful for that. So appreciate it so much. And thank you.
Okay.
Well...